Okay, welcome everyone. This is Viva Communications and Communities, Administration, Moderation, Security, and Compliance. Not much more we could have thrown in to this hour. My name is Mike McLean. I'm a Principal PM Manager on Viva Engage, and I'm joined today by Manika and Nancy, who also work on the product team, and we all support Microsoft Viva. So what are we covering today? So we broke this session out into 3 sections. Today we'll be covering the 3 core modules from our Communications and Communities bundle. The first section will cover Viva Connections, where Nancy will walk us through how to get that set up, how to get it going. Then we'll spend some time talking about Viva Engage. We'll walk through what actually is in the Viva Communications and Communities SKU, and how does that compare to the Viva Suite SKU. And then we'll close with Manika walking through Viva Amplify. All right, so the Communication and Communities bundle, what is this? Well, we created this as a way to bring together Viva Connections, Viva Amplify, and Viva Engage to really jumpstart the communication scenarios in your organizations. It's really a way to transform communications and target specific groups and also your entire company in several different ways. This allows your customers to create communities where employees can share knowledge with each other, and it also allows your leaders to connect to their employees in a more intimate way. And over the past couple of years, we've been working very aggressively to incorporate more AI and leverage the large language models so that as knowledge is shared, it can be found and surfaced much more easily. And of course, we're incorporating much more rich analytics with services like Viva Engage. You can look at the reach that leaders are having throughout their organization. You can look at how your messages are landing, how they're being delivered, how Viva Amplify is helping accelerate those scenarios. So to start us out, we'll have Nancy walk through Viva Connections.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everybody. Let's get started with Connections. And to begin with, we'll talk about the life cycle of Viva Connections. So just to clarify things for everybody, getting set up and managing Viva Connections fundamentally requires 4 different roles. 2 of those are optional. 2 of those are core to the experience of Viva Connections. So the first 2 roles, which is the global admin and the teams admin, we'll talk about the jobs to be done. Those are optional to have if you are setting up more than 1 connections experiences. And to help manage, configure, and get started and keep the experience fresh and engaging is the connections operator role and the CorpCom role. So to begin with, the life cycle of Viva Connections in Mac, the global admin is responsible for creating and managing connections experiences. They are also responsible for assigning permissions to the right operators or the editors of the experience. They would be responsible for targeting the right experience to the audiences they would like. And they eventually enable the experience once they feel it's ready to go. So all the CRUD operations in our regular life, create, read, update, delete. That's the whole scenario of global admin. They are the ones who will be enabling the operators to start configuring and managing connections experience. Next followed is the teams admin role, which lives in the TAC and is responsible for uploading app logo and icon. So now we have an option, we have a feature rolling out pretty soon, which allows us to set up multiple app logos and icon to go with your company's branding. So if it is a subsidiary in your company that wants to identify itself different with a different brand identity, it's totally possible to manage a completely different logo name through TAC. Moving on to the third role, which is the operator role, which is the editor, is responsible for configuring and getting started. So they are the ones who would set up the dashboard, target the right cards which are needed for each experience, and they would get started by setting up some important resources, choosing the company theme and fonts, and also select the right background image. So everything on the connections experience, how it shows up for the employees, is managed within Viva Connections, and it is managed by the editor role. So once all this is done, once the setup is enabled, once the operators have taken action and it's available for all the employees, keeping it fresh and engaging is a critical part of bringing employees back to Viva Connections. That's where we expect the CorpComs to be sending out regular updates, updating the life cycle of cards. So if there are new cards to onboard, we expect CorpComs to be managing to keep it engaging enough through announcements and news posts and updates. So those are the 4 roles responsible for keeping the life cycle of Viva Connections. So let's walk through our journey in Admin Center. Once I'm in Mac, in the settings panel, I will find the Viva option there. Within the Viva category, we have Viva Connections to go to, and we have an option right there in Viva Connections to get started with setting up a Viva Connections experience. We end up seeing 2 experiences right on that screen, which is you can get started without a home site, or if you already have a home site configured, there's a way to get started from that. So looking at the right screen there are 2 options to get started with a new connections experience. If you have nothing invested, that's the first one is your option to go with. The second option is if there isn't anything, if there is a home site you want to connect your experience to, that's where you would pick your option. Once the admin has selected a new connections experience, they will be able to create assign the right permissions on the operator for the operator role. They would be able to add the right operators as the in the flow, and set targeting, which is the next step. So if you have multiple connections experiences, I would have shown you if this was working as a demo, but right now we'll just talk about the steps needed to enable an experience. So once the connections experience is started from here, the next step is assigning the right permissions. The next would be targeting it appropriately for the different audiences. So if you have different groups of users who should be seeing a completely distinct experience for Viva Connections, there is a way in the Mac to break this out, to break down the experiences by license types, so FLW versus IWs. So if you have a large FLW presence and a good mix of IWs and FLWs, that's one way to segregate your connections experiences, or based on M365 groups. So if you have a sales organization who should be seeing a distinct experience versus a tech community, there's easy ways to target your connections experiences appropriately. And once that's done, the admin should just be able to hit enable, and that's where we get started. Once this is done, I think I wanted to also show quickly how the Teams admin can enable the app policies and upload the right app logo and naming. So that's so right here in Teams Admin Center, if we go to the Teams apps and find the Connections app, there are easy ways to even pin your Connections app right in the Teams for your employees. So it shows up in the different slots. You can choose and pick which slot to show this Connections experience in. And there are easy ways from here in the Teams Admin Center to upload an app logo and update the name of this app. So as we see in these screenshots, in the last screenshot, I am able to pick up Rally Cloud as the name of my connections experience because that's what resonates most with my employees. With that, what I wanted to show is now, since we decided to have multiple connections experiences, we want 2 different groups of users in my organization to see different experiences. So that's what I have. There's like a Rally Cloud app and logo, and I have a Contoso app and logo, which will show up differently for different audiences in my organization. So we're done with the setup. Let's move on to the critical part of configuring the experience. So what we were talking about, the admin, the global admin is the one who actually assigns permission to an operator. Once that's done, the operator can sign in to their connections experience, and they have multiple ways of managing, configuring, and personalizing the experience, the connections experience for the employees, making it more relevant for the employees. So these are all the features that make it easy for operators to find the relevant news content, cards, resources for the employees. So talking a little bit about each of these features. So on the right, the change the look and custom background image. Those are the ones to get started with. And those are the ones which bring in your brand identity within Connections experience. So you can reflect on what the company's look and feel, what would tie into the company's look and feel, and bring that to Connections. And to personalize this destination for the employees, to find it more relevant, find all the apps, tools, and resources they need to get started. They need on a daily basis, on a regular basis, to be productive at work. These are the different components in Connections. The Spotlight, which brings you the important company news on the top of the Connections experience. Dashboard cards, which are targeted. They bring in all the tools, Teams, apps, and any important actions that the employee needs to do on a regular basis. Those are the dashboard cards to get started. And after that is the resources. So any important links we want the users to come back to, the employees to come back to, that's where I would point my employees to. So resources are pretty good, like experiences where users would want to manage important information, resources without having to bookmark anywhere else. Once configured, you're ready to launch and keep it fresh and engaging. So to keep your experience fresh and engaging, we have different tools and options for corp comms. We expect the corp comms to send out important updates through news publications. And we bring all the important information, company news, prominently in the Connections experience in different places. So Spotlight is a place which brings in all important company news, shows up anything which is relevant for the company. So we have settings like pinning that would allow the operator to get employees' attention on any important post. The same content also shows up in different other places. So we have Feed tab, which brings in all your conversations from Engage. It brings in your important campaigns from Amplify. So Engage and Amplify, all of that coming in together in Connections. And all the company news is also, we find all the company news showing up in Feed. Based on the ranking, a user has been engaging with different news sources. We also have news showing up on the dashboard, and we can connect to your communities, your Engage communities directly from the dashboard. So basically, different components bring everything together. So Connections as a shell makes it easy for your employee to find everything in a single pane of glass. And Announcements is another feature which we just GA'd and is available to use. So this sends out important time-sensitive information and shows up on the top of the Connections experience. So anything that needs immediate action, has a call to action to go with it, and we want the employees to see it almost as soon as possible. This Announcements is responsible for sending out a notification so that it doesn't go missed. So that's what it is. That will bring our Connections employees back to Connections, find all the important updates.
All right. Thanks so much, Nancy. Let's give a round of applause. Fantastic. So Nancy just walked through how to configure Viva Connections, which creates a location inside Microsoft Teams where employees can pull information and stay up to date, along with a variety of other features. Now we'll transition to talk a little bit more about the Viva Suite and the Viva Communications and Communities SKU. Just a quick show of hands before I get into this. How many folks here are already using Viva Engage? Okay, all right, so for the recording, maybe the 25 to 30% of the room. Okay, fantastic. So about a year ago, we introduced a new SKU. I'll this CNC SKU. Okay, so I've already said the full name 3 times, so we'll shorten this moving forward. And previously, we had the Viva Suite SKU available, which gave you everything Viva under the sun. You have Viva Pulse, you have Viva Goals, of course, you have Viva Amplify and everything else. However, there was a set of that wanted to get started with the communication scenarios and kind of use that as getting their foot in the door with Microsoft Viva. In August last year, we launched the CNC SKU, which was slightly cheaper on a per user basis per month. And what this allowed us to do is combine the Connections, Amplify, and the Engage capabilities into an offering that could be subscribed and then deployed for our customers. So what I wanted to walk through briefly was the difference between what you get in the seated capabilities with your E3 or E5 SKUs that you might already have, and then what's available with these premium SKUs. Slide, it's a pretty good slide to take a picture of it if you want. Shows that with Viva Engage specifically, if you already have an E3 or E5 SKU, your customers have the ability to create communities, they can start posting conversations, your leaders can post with their personal storylines, and if they have E5, they can use advanced security to configure how the service is rolled out and managed, which is great. Over the past couple of years, we've built a ton of premium scenarios around Leadership Corner, Ask Me Anythings, the ability to see advanced analytics on your reach. And so all of this is available in the CNC SKU and Viva Suite. And so in this chart on the right-hand side, it shows you that whether you buy CNC or you buy Viva Suite, you get all the great Viva Engage premium capabilities. The row at the very bottom, which is bold, calls out our announcement on Monday, which is that Copilot has launched to general availability for Viva. This is super exciting, and this means that now Viva Engage supports advanced scenarios like sentiment analysis, and then and actually using Copilot to help author your posts inside Viva Engage. This is part of the CNC and the Viva Suite SKU, which is pretty exciting for us. On the left-hand side here, I have a thumbnail screenshot of something we've made available, which is a self-service trial. So if you're one of the people who didn't raise your hands yet, when this deck is published, there's a link where you can navigate and enter your contact info, and by default, you can get a 50-person, 60-day trial of CNC. We've recently expanded this, where we can now onboard a very select number of 1,200 seat trials for 90 days. So if you're interested in that, talk to your account teams, reach out to Microsoft, and we can probably set you up. So this is pretty exciting. It allows customers to try before they buy, and the 1,200 seat offer allows you to trial with a larger number of users. We found sometimes with 50, it's a little difficult to really test out the reach of something like Viva Engage, which is why we're trying to gradually increase this to much larger trial. Acquiring licenses is the first stage, right? And when we talk to customers, a lot of times we hear that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is actually getting those licenses assigned. So here I pulled in a screenshot from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. This is available at admin.microsoft.com. You can navigate out to the Admin Center, select your users, and then you can assign the new Viva Suite or CNC SKUs. This can also be done in bulk through scripting. There's a lot of examples out there which are readily available. And so what you see here is Adele, who has a Viva Suite SKU and an Office 365 E5 SKU. And then below the SKU, in the bottom part, you have a set of service plans. This controls which capabilities are enabled for your users. By default, service plans like the Viva Engage Communities and Communications will be enabled, Viva Amplify, Viva Goals, and you'll even see a Viva Engage Core for some of that seated functionality that I talked about earlier. So these will be enabled, and there are some organizations that turn these on or off. Of course, the users will need these turned on if they want to access the capabilities. So the call to action here is go enable your licenses for your users if you'd like them to use Microsoft Viva. Now, we've talked about the SKUs and the service plans. We'll go a little deeper into the administration of Viva Engage and how this works. There is a hierarchy of roles that are available. It's not too complicated. I think a lot of us are familiar with the global administrator role. This is the administrator in the Microsoft 365 service who has access to pretty much everything. The best practices here are that you might just have a handful of people in your organization that have that power. And the global admin will probably decide, a handful of folks who they'd like to delegate management of the Viva Engage or answer service. And so here they can determine who would be, a great Engage administrator. And the good news here is that the assignment of roles to control that power can be done through Entra ID. So here in Entra ID, if someone is assigned the Yammer administrator role or the knowledge manager role, that syncs down into Viva Engage and Answers, and they're treated as an Engage admin or an Answers admin, respectively. This is great because then you can take advantage of all the Entra ID admin assignment features, assigning to groups, assigning for limited times, and it integrates nice and smoothly. Within Viva Engage, there is a way to create an additional level of admin who specifically manages the network settings and the configuration. That would be the network administrator. If you've used Yammer in a previous life, you might be familiar with that. What we see is like, greater than, I think about 99% of our admins are the full verified admin that syncs down from Entra ID. About 0.5% are the network admin that's created inside Viva Engage. So it's kind of a more scope responsibility, but that person will just be tweaking how the network is configured. And then over the past 18 months, we introduced a new role that's more focused on communication and collaboration, and this is the corporate communicator. So the corporate communicator on the bottom here, it was created because we realized that a lot of the communications teams had a need, not for someone who can manage the entire Viva Engage service, but for someone who has the ability to identify who the leaders are, assign the leaders, create campaigns, and manage content. But they didn't want those folks to be able to turn Viva Engage on or off. So with inside Viva Engage, you can designate a set of corporate communicators who have that power. Now, within each community inside Viva Engage, yes, you have a community admin, and they can manage the content specific to that community as well. So here I've included a couple of useful links. These will be available when we publish the slides that go much deeper into setting up Viva Engage, identifying those leaders, adding corporate communicators, managing campaigns. And what's really nice about the Viva Engage admin experience, it's available both on the web through Viva Engage and through Microsoft Teams. So here I've included a few examples. You navigate through the gear menu to our admin center link. On the web, you can access our new admin center through these tiles, and inside Teams, it's the exact same experience. A lot of our customers are Teams first, and that's great for them. Other customers, have licensing set up different ways with Teams, and they prefer to go to the web. One pretty exciting announcement that we just finished building in the last couple of weeks is that we're no longer going to enforce a license to access the admin center. So a lot of our customers had specific accounts that were set up to perform admin functions, and that required an extra license. And so we heard a lot of feedback, and we took that to the engineering team. We said, okay, for those admins and those accounts, we're not actually going to enforce the license anymore. There is a lot of monitoring analytics around how many folks are accessing them without licenses, and we'll be monitoring that as well. But I did want to share that today. So that's pretty exciting. That'll be rolling out over the rest of this quarter. All right, so another exciting announcement is that, like I mentioned, Copilot in Viva Engage was announced on Monday. Last month, to prepare for this, we announced that Viva Engage has integrated with Viva Feature Access Management. Has anybody heard of VFAM yet? It's a slightly more advanced topic. No? Okay, great. So VFAM is a technology that's available with Microsoft Viva to assign Viva capabilities to either your entire organization, specific groups, or specific users. So this is super useful because as a capability like Copilot rolls out, you can decide, all right, our organization has policies, perhaps this set of users are allowed to have Copilot, this set of users are not. And now you can enforce that programmatically by configuring this either in the admin center or through PowerShell. So here I have a link to our announcements. There's a lot of information and technical details around how to enable that. So if you're interested, I encourage you to follow up. But this now allows your customers to say, great, I can leave Copilot enabled for everyone, or I can disable it or enable it for the ability to opt in or prevent them from opting out as well. So it's really great that Viva Engage has integrated with this, and we've been able to nail this Copilot launch this week. All right. The next few slides walk through a few best practices. All right, so if we follow this journey, we've walked through the licenses, the service plans, talked about the admin experience a bit. Now we're getting ready to roll this out in partnership with our Microsoft IT team, Microsoft Digital. And we've learned a lot around how to roll this out, some of the challenges that we've experienced. And so at the top here, we have some guidelines around setting, philosophy and some principles around a service like Viva Engage. For those of you who haven't used it yet, it's a place to create communities where people can post, they can share. It's very much like LinkedIn for the enterprise. It gives employees a lot of freedom, but we also want to make sure that they're following the guidelines that are put in place by the organization, and really just continuing to create that safe place for people to connect. This helps drive later conversations when a piece of content might come up where you're like, oh, is this appropriate for this community or that community? Is it something that we want everyone to see or not? And so that's kind of the first best practice. In addition, it's good to think through like who the leaders are in your organization that might be a great voice service like Microsoft Viva. Through features like Storyline, they can share their experiences with Copilot. It's super easy to create a post. Jeff Teeper has an awesome Friday 5 where he posts a video every Friday about what he's working on this week. So we've got a lot of great leaders at Microsoft that have stepped up and kind of led the charge there. And then it's great to think through kind of what that communication strategy looks like. There'll be a set of leaders there, but then you also have a corporate communications team. You might have a quarterly process to release financial results or a monthly town hall update. And you can think through, like, do you publish this through Amplify? Do you share it on Viva Engage as well? It will get picked up in the Daily Digest email, which is pretty exciting. So you can think through the methods there and the modes of communication. The leaders, like I said, are pretty influential driving the adoption. And at Microsoft, we've thought a lot about what it means to be a leader in this context. So we said, all right, anyone who is a corporate vice president, or above, would be designated a leader. They have a large enough scope where they could see, analytics around their audience, who's receiving their messages, who's consuming over which medium. And that's worked out pretty well for us. They can host Ask Me Anythings and town halls and things like that. And they usually are the leaders in that rhythm of the business. So you just have to think about what fits for you. And once those leaders are identified, then they can be created by the Corp Comms admin, like I mentioned, or the Viva Engage admins. Great. This last worksheet is a guide for adoption that's available on our adoption site. I actually think it's useful if you're rolling out any type of service. You have to make sure that your compliance and your legal team knows what's happening. It's good to review the capabilities so they understand what type of collaboration you're opening up. Are you going to allow people outside of your organization into some of these communities or not? What type? Are there different sensitivity levels? And I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about some of our multi-tenant as we recently opened up. And so this is, like I said, available for download, or I saw some folks taking a picture, which is great. A couple more adoption guides here that are available for download that help you look at your employee experience dashboard around what services people are using and how they're interacting with it. So moving along, we've got the service maybe starting to roll out. Now we'll talk about how to manage it, right? How to moderate it. So Viva Engage really is a place where we want to foster these respectful conversations. We want to encourage employees to search for knowledge, share their thoughts freely, by still following those organizational guidelines, right? And this is largely supported by these 3 pillars. So we've got moderation features that align to the content creators. We also have some that align to the content consumers and the content moderator, right? And there's features available for each of these. So from a content creator perspective, if I'm creating a conversation inside of Viva Engage, I have the ability to close that conversation. I can delete my own message, right? I have full scope of ownership over that. From a content consumer standpoint, if I'm seeing someone else's content, I have the power to report that conversation. That will flag that and send a message to my admins where they can follow up. And I also have the power to mute a community in my feed. So if there is a community inside your organization that's generating, a lot of noise or a lot of content, and I don't want to see it every day, well, I can actually go in and I can say mute this in my feed. I think I have a screenshot in a minute. And then from a moderator perspective, we have a set of features around monitoring that can be set up. You can limit who can move conversations. I have an example of that I'll show in a second. And you can go in there and delete threads, create restricted posting communities and things of that nature. We do caution, that scenario around deleting threads. Viva Engage is supposed to be a place to have open conversations. So sometimes it's more efficient and more effective to close those conversations, and provide some communication to that community around what's happening. Maybe that event has moved on, and we're no longer focused on that anymore. There's no reason really to delete it. We can just close that and let it expire. And then, of course, they have the ability to pin post and leverage advanced features in our communication and compliance suite. So from a creator perspective, one feature that we enabled recently, folks might not be aware of, is a user can delegate the ability to close a conversation on their behalf. So if you have, let's say, a leader who creates a post in a community to say, I'm so thankful all the work my team put in. This is an exciting day to ship this product. They are probably going to move on to their next thing. They're a busy person. And so they might create a delegate who could close that conversation if all of a sudden there's, 1,000 comments, that are rolling and they have to perform a, follow-up tomorrow. And so this allows users to delegate that capability so someone else can close it on their behalf. That's what that shows in the screenshot here. We have Adele who has the ability to close this conversation on behalf of a different user who initially started it. Now, from a consumer moderation perspective, like I said, employees can mute communities in their feed. This screenshot shows a user who can navigate to the ellipses inside the community header, and they can select mute community and feed. Like I said, this mutes it for their feed that shows up for them inside the Viva Engage experience, and it removes it from their daily digest that comes through email. And lastly, from a moderator perspective, this isn't a scenario where we've been investing quite a bit. The moderators, like I said, can go to applications like Purview if they would like to perform advanced, quarantine of messages, and they can come back and delete messages or view a whole conversation. But what we also enabled was the ability to limit who can move conversations into a specific community. So this screenshot here shows a toggle at the bottom of the community settings where the community admin could say, I actually don't want users to be able to move conversations into this community. If it's a community that's used to communicate, from senior leadership, you might not want, Mike moving in a post from like dogs at Microsoft or NCAA basketball games or whatever. It's not an appropriate place. So here they can limit who can move conversations into that community, which has proven to be pretty useful. Sneak peek into where we're headed next is around restricting user access for certain employees. So we're right now building, we have this on our roadmap, capability where an admin could say, I think I need to pause this user for a bit just to assess their activity before re-enabling them in the service. This will kind of, help them triage a bit if they're seeing like an influx of posts or there's some questionable content or something like that. Now, the last section we'll cover is a pretty exciting one on multi-tenant capabilities. When we talk to our customers, we find a lot of our customers have more than one tenant. Does anybody here have more than one tenant that they work with? Yeah. Okay. I know there's always a handful of folks. And what we've seen is that a lot of these tenants are created through like acquisitions, divestitures, and they really have a need to communicate across these tenants. Because if you look at a company like Microsoft, we have Microsoft Corporation, and we have GitHub, we have LinkedIn, right? We have all these other companies, and Satya Nadella wants to be able to communicate to all these tenants at once. And so what we've now built is support to create a community that can include these users. You can now create announcements and storylines, and pretty soon run things like campaigns and Ask Me Anythings. Now I know this is a more technical audience, so I can explain kind of how this works. We have what's called a hub and spoke model, where there's generally a primary tenant that has a majority of users. And then there's additional tenants that are configured as spokes, right? And so the users from the primary hub can now run these campaigns, and they can include these users from the spoke tenants. Now this screenshot here shows the experience that we recently released in the Engage Admin Center. You'll be able to set up who is the primary hub tenant and then who are the spokes. The multi-tenant scenario overall is something that we've invested in across Microsoft. Last week, they announced that it launched to general availability with Entra ID and everyone else. So you actually go to Entra ID and the Microsoft 365 Admin Center to configure it at a higher level, and then in Engage you can specify which are the hub and spoke. Now, just to walk you through a little bit of how this works, we have a quick demo.
MTO leaders can compose storyline content just as they do in single-tenant configurations, with some key additional features. Users from other tenants can be mentioned, with their home tenant badge visible to differentiate users. Rich media, such as images, can be attached to the text and all MTO users can view it. Finally, the leader's content can be designated an MTO storyline announcement by choosing the audience with multiple organizations. The spoke tenant user receives a notification of the announcement in Teams as well as in Viva Engage. The spoke user can react to the announcement as if they were part of the leader's tenant, and they can reply to the announcement in the same way, complete with GIFs and emojis to illustrate their response. Their engagement will be visible to other users in the MTO. Going to a more active thread, a spoke tenant user can react and respond to the replies of other users in the MTO, complete with differentiating badges. To the end user, it feels like everyone belongs to the same organization. No one is external or limited in their participation. Finally, the MTO leader can take advantage of in-depth conversation analytics on their MTO content. While data is available in aggregate by default, the leader can break down these stats on a per-tenant basis, directly comparing and contrasting their post-engagement across verticals or divisions, providing critical insights that influence their corporate communication strategy going forward.
So what you just saw was a tenant that was configured for multi-tenant organizations. And as they shared their storyline, the spoke users could see that, comment, react, just as if they were part of the tenant. So if you saw some of the keynote yesterday, they briefly touched on inside Teams, you could actually switch between tenants without logging out and logging back in. And so what we're really trying to do is treat all of these users as first-class citizens, which is pretty neat. Where are we right now? So we shipped multi-tenant organization capabilities. You can create posts. You can create announcements. We have finished building out MTO communities and launched campaigns to preview, which is pretty exciting. So that's in preview right now. And then over the next fiscal year, we'll be launching Ask Me Anythings and additional scenarios in MTO for Viva Engage. Great. So that brings me to the end of my section. Thanks for your time. I'll hand it off to Manika.
Hello, everyone. My name is Manika. I'm a product manager on Viva Amplify. So the last little piece of this puzzle for the communications and communities bundle, C&C bundle. Real quick, how many of you have tried Viva Amplify or have heard of it? Yeah, I expected really not too many of you. We're the newest. We GA'd last fall. So if you're not aware of what Viva Amplify is, all the feature functionality for corporate communications, today, right now, we're talking about admins. We'll start with this slide here, which kind of gives you a step-by-step breakdown of the entire Viva Amplify workflow. Starting with step 0, which is setup, and we're going to get into that more. But then you have the whole process of what any type of communicator would do, whether you are a corporate communicator or you're a casual communicator, a creator communicator, which is like myself. I'm a product manager. I don't send out very official communications, but I do like to send out a publication every 2 weeks or so to my stakeholders to let them know about the status report of the features that I'm working on. So there's a ton of different use cases for Viva Amplify. This workflow applies to pretty much all of them, that you're going to create a campaign. If you're collaborating, you're inviting members to collaborate with you. For campaigns that are a little more official, you probably have a campaign brief. We want people to be tied to their purpose, make sure that what they're writing actually aligns to the message that they're trying to drive. So that's what the brief is for. You create one main draft of your publication, and then that draft just automatically works in SharePoint for news, works in Outlook. You can create a post to a Teams channel. And really exciting is we've just started rolling out the feature to publish to Viva Engage, our partner in the C&C bundle. So we're really excited about that. You preview and customize for each of your channels, and then you send it out. And then you probably saw this in the keynote yesterday. We have some really robust reporting available to you that really differentiates Amplify from the other ways that you'd send out your communications, that you can see broken down sentiment of how people are responding to it, how many times it's been promoted. I'll talk a little bit more about incorporating organizational data into that, but the reporting is definitely really exciting and you continue to manage. But let's get into step 0, which is that setup. So Mike and Nancy showed you a lot in the admin center about assigning those Viva licenses, starting to set up. And so for Viva Amplify, there are just a few things to do, and lucky for you, they're really easy, so you can get started with this super soon. We leverage existing admin rules to set up and deploy Viva Amplify. So you assign a SharePoint admin rule to manage the campaigns, and you can also assign group admins to manage those campaigns. And then there's another feature that we have here that is available to tenants that preview features with us. So if you're a tenant that has a couple of Amplify licenses, and your team reaches out to our Microsoft team, you can be a part of our preview program. We have a slide at the end with a little bit of information on that and a link to opt into that. I won't be able to stick around for questions because I have to run, but also if you're interested in that, just let Mike and Nancy know, and they can definitely pass that along to me and I can reach out to your organization. But we do have the ability to preview features, so there's a setting there as well where you can toggle who in your organization sees those preview features so that it's not everyone. So for example, the ability to publish to Viva Engage, that is something that is a feature that we have in preview right now. So these are the roles that we have. And then it shows here that you manage who can create campaigns in your organization. So you can decide, we want everyone to be able to create campaigns because everyone's a communicator in our organization. Or if you'd like to simplify this a little bit, take it slow, you can have only certain people with that ability to create campaigns. So here at Microsoft, everyone has a Viva Amplify license, but the person in charge of our deployment at MS Digital has selected certain people to be able to do campaigns right now as we get more comfortable with it. And then because Amplify is built upon SharePoint, all existing SharePoint features and technology rules right into Amplify, including sensitivity labels, Microsoft information protection, retention policies. That is all included within Amplify, so you don't even have to worry about that. Give it a second thought. So that's pretty much like the only big setting to manage there is, do you want everyone to be able to manage campaigns or just a certain group? And then the one last thing that I'll mention here that I kind of alluded to at the beginning is importing org data for reporting. So this is what we showed at the keynote yesterday, that for Amplify, you can see in this teeny tiny screen, attend another session tomorrow if you want to get more into this, of some of the reporting available to you. And it gets even richer. You'll really be able to figure out what's making your communications successful with this data. And if you import your org data, if you upload this organizational data, you'll see that breakdown by org as well. So for example, when we publish out communications here at Microsoft, I can see that in my organization, Jeff Tieper's organization, how many people have interacted with the mail versus in a different organization. And of course, we obscure the data to some point to protect privacy. So there have to be at least 5 people or more in a group. One common example that my manager always uses is I'm the only person in the Bay Area. And so she can't see who in the Bay Area has read emails, because then it would be like, Manica, you didn't read my email, that kind of thing. So we do make sure that we're not giving away too much information, but a lot of richness here so that once you see what's working, wow, I reached my campaign goal, that 75% of people who got this email opened the link, then you know how to repeat that and have successful communications throughout all of your campaigns and publications. I think that is the last slide for Amplify, so I will hand it back to Mike to talk about the Viva Customer Connection Program.
All right, thanks so much. Let's give Manica a round of applause. All right. So like she briefly mentioned, we have a preview program called the Viva Customer and Connection Program, very similar to our TAP programs that we used to run if you've been around for a while. This allows you to features for you and your tenants in preview mode. which is pretty great. So please navigate out to this ak.ms/VCCPOPTIN. You have to opt in for the VCCP program, but it's pretty exciting. As we have a growing number of modules in the suite, you can actually take an early look at Viva Goals, Insights, Pulse, Connections, everything. So it's a really great way, to see some of the things that we shared today. Great. So just to recap, what we saw today, we saw how to configure and set up Viva Connections to create that experience in Microsoft Teams, where you can share and pull data across your organization. We also walked through the SKUs that are available, CNC SKU, Viva Suite, assigning licenses, administering Viva Engage, and then we saw some pretty exciting new multi-tenant org capabilities that are available if you have multiple tenants, and then close out with Viva Amplify, how to get that going for communicating across your company. So with that, I think we can wrap this session up, and we'll be around for any questions. Thanks for being a great audience.